Fire, fire, fire.
Ira Software, the guy that worked at Blizzard, did you know that? He's like a 5-year, 15-year veteran at Blizzard. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember too. So they actually went to Parliament. It took a little bit, but they actually went. And this guy is a giga chat, by the way. Long-time gamer actually went to the government and said, guys, you need to stop this shit. All right, let's watch it.
I am the founder of the Stop Killing Games consumer movement,
Hello,
which has many
Sky.
shared goals with the initiative. I'd like to clarify what it means to destroy a video game.
William Scott.
The second slide. When we say a game has been destroyed, what we mean is a publisher has permanently disabled all copies of it that have been sold so no one can ever play them again. It would be like removing every single copy of a book or film in existence, effectively erasing it from the culture. The way this practice works is first...
And no other media really suffers from it other than CD-ROMs, Blu-rays, and DVDs. I think that's also a big proponent to being lost culture. Yeah, because like a piece of art you can consume no matter what, but there's a lot of like things like vinyls and I would argue cassette tapes as well, VHSs. I think those all need to be protected. Those can get lost to time. And the other thing about VHSs and cassette tapes, they degrade. They are biodegradable. That's the scary thing. Like, art pieces have to be restored and preserved. With cassette tapes and video games, not video games, with VHS tapes, you have to protect them. Yeah, DVDs also rot, but it takes a little bit longer than that.
A publisher sells a copy of a video game.
We need to protect
However, it has
those
been
things.
designed so that it must connect to the publisher in order to function. This acts as a potential kill switch. The customer is also given no information when the game will stop working, even though the publisher has decided to assume that responsibility. Then, after an undisclosed length of time, the publisher disables all existing copies of the game, but keeps the customer's money.
And in my opinion, even a bad game like Concord, I think needs to be preserved as well, because people need to know how bad it is and to know that not to do the same mistake again. I truly believe that, even though we shit all over Concord and say it's a bad game and has bad character design, just bad everything, I actually think we need to preserve things like that.
The publisher also enacts countermeasures to ensure repairing the game...
How are people going to learn?
Sorry. To ensure repairing the game is almost impossible, even for experienced software professionals. From this point onward, no customer can ever run the purchase again. Besides destroying the game, this practice is also subverting customer expectations.
Yeah.
Most video games can work indefinitely, which has been the customer standard for half a century, including ones that connect to the internet.
It does take a lot of work to get something working, but it does. I think that, I don't know, maybe it's a weird thing to say, but I think that video games need to be like cars. Like, you can buy an old car and the insides are still going to be the same. You just need to know what you're looking at. You can repair an old car with care and knowledge. If you just know the basics. With newer cars, I've learned this because there's some people that work as mechanics and I know them through my family and stuff. They tell me that, like, working on newer cars is so much more difficult than with old ones because, like, they're just so different and they like, add extra stuff and, like, they move shit around and it doesn't make any sense.
Alternately,
need, like,
a small number of video
different
games
gadgets for, like,
operate as
testing and shit,
subscription
too.
services, but those inform the customer exactly when their access ends at the time of payment. The games we're referring to do no such thing. It's a bit of miscommunication. They almost always contain terms stating they can end at any time for any reason.
That too.
What this means is customers have no real protections when they buy games like these. They are unable to keep them and they are not informed when they will end. This behavior would be outrageous in other industries. If you bought a book in a store, the publisher cannot come into your home and take back your book at will.
Imagine the book mafia just breaks your legs.
Bought an insurance policy, you would be informed when that policy ends.
Hell no.
Not that the seller could end it at any time for any reason, but still keep your money. The games being sold this way are operating similar to scams. Publishers know customers expect video games to last, so they sell these in the same way as ones that can work forever. As a one-time purchase with no expiry date, then price them the same. Publishers know that if customers were informed exactly when they plan to disable their games, that would reduce sales, since the longevity of a game affects how much customers are willing to pay. The industry is trying to have it.
Unless you're Nintendo and you still price your old games that are like 10, 15 years old and they're still $70. All I'm saying is Nintendo's cringe like that.
Both ways, finding ways to say they're selling you a game that they're not selling you. This creates confusion for everyone involved and is part of why it is taking customers so long to get exposure on this practice. The legality is also unsettled. Earlier, members of Parliament assisted us in asking questions to the EU Commission about how legal the terms and game license agreements were, especially being able to terminate them at any time for any reason. The Commission stated Directive 93/13 EEC prohibits unfair terms causing a significant imbalance in the parties' rights and obligations to the detriment of consumers. The Commission also recommended consumers file complaints with businesses across member states through the European Consumer Centers network. In 2024, we had volunteers across the majority of EU countries submitting complaints against the French company Ubisoft for disabling the game The Crew. The responses we received from the
Poopysoft.
ECC.
Yeah, tell you go kick rocks. I had a game that I played when I was a kid called Black and White and Black and White 2, and because Microsoft bought the studios and then thusly killed them, you cannot get the game without pirating or buying it through eBay. And I'm like... And by the way, it is not easy to patch those games to work either. They're very buggy. And I remember I asked Tammy, because Tammy is one of my mods, and she told me how to do it, and she sent me how to fix the game as well. Yeah, Lionhead Studios got shut down after, I don't know, it passed hands through a bunch of stuff. So, like, the IP's basically lost to time. You're never going to get it back.
The network were extremely inconsistent. Some officials said there was nothing they could do. Others said the company was required to run the game indefinitely, which is
not the Pokemon game. It's a different game, chat.
Unrealistic.
It's a different
but the majority
game.
Stated there was no clear regulation on this practice. We were independently able to get thousands of complaints submitted to consumer agencies in France and Germany, but there still has been no decision on them on the legality either.
Dead game
To the best of our
list.
knowledge, no one in the EU has ever been compensated for this and hundreds of other titles.
There are so many MMOs that are dead like this too, and they just won't give up the rights to it either. Like, people bought the game years and years ago and they shut it down. I think there's a game out there, I think City of Heroes, is that still around? I remember I had a friend that was like an avid fan, and they loved that game. Is it still around, I wonder? Okay, it is. But, like, I remember people were, like, speculating and being like, oh, well, what if it shuts down one day, then they can't play that, yeah.
In short, governments in EU countries are not sure how to handle this situation, and customers are overwhelmingly not being compensated for the loss of their purchases.
Run on fan servers.
It is an ideal situation for clear regulation. This is not a new practice. It started approximately 2005 and began negatively impacting customers for them around 2010 onward. However, it often affects a minority of customers whose complaints can get lost in the system. It wasn't until a large case affecting millions that any attempts to get government attention were possible.
Look, some of these games people bought and they got shut down within like 3 years. 3 years, 3 years, a year. This one's 5 years. Like, it's not even like a lengthy bit of time either. It's like, it's just kind of like nothing. It's under 10.
No answer. The EU Commission says this must be handled on a case-by-case basis, but this practice is extremely widespread. Future slides. We have formed an amateur study examining over 1,100 video games that require a connection to the publisher.
Yeah.
The majority of these have been deliberately disabled by the publisher, with many of the rest still at risk of being destroyed.
Square Enix,
Under the strictest interpretation
Soft,
of what it means to disable a game, the study found that out of over 400 titles, publishers disable a customer's purchase 93.5% of the time when ending support. This business practice is responsible for more destruction to the medium than anything else by an enormous margin. There is also a strong correlation between this practice and the size of the publisher, as most small studios do not engage in it, as it requires far more resources, work, and liability.
Yeah, it is absolutely a rich man's game. Yep, that's actually a really good point.
Than they can handle. So even though this impacts a minority of games, it disproportionately affects customers due to the scale of the largest offenders. From sales figures, it impacts tens of millions of customers, minimum in the EU. This impacts developers as well. This may seem obvious, but based on interviews and feedback, we found the majority of game developers do not support having games they've worked on destroyed. They can spend years of their lives creating them, but they are often not the ones making these business decisions, and sometimes even sign non-disclosure agreements.
And I would even argue that it's not just a piece of art, but it's multiple mediums, forms of art. If you have a game, you work on art, you work on coding, you work on voice acting, you work on just like general sound design, like, and that gets lost to time. It sucks. But video games do not have the same rights as like some pieces of art do. Even the most amazing games that exist, or like they've sold millions and millions of copies in the last like 20-30 years, they don't have the same rights as like the fucking Mona Lisa or any other massive piece of art to protect itself from being like, you know, destroyed.
So they cannot voice their opinion on the matter.
It's sad.
The main point I hope that does not get lost in this hearing is this initiative welcomes any solution that will solve the problem of video games being destroyed on this scale. We want this to be as easy and as practical as possible for all parties involved, and are very open to how that is achieved. We are not even asking publishers to change their business or monetization models, only that once they end support, they do so in a responsible way. Our only goal is to prohibit this destructive practice and thus obtain basic protections for consumers and the medium as a whole.
I am very afraid that this is gonna go on deaf ears, because Ross is sitting in a parliament where it's like mostly people that are over the age of 40, and a lot of people, I would say the graph goes up the younger you are for you to engage with video games. Not that people who are over 40 don't play video games, but I would say it's far, far less.
I'd like to add a little bit on the economic aspect. Again, when planned for from the beginning, the cost can be very small. It's mostly about when it's undoing that's more of a cost related.
What if Candy Crush shuts down though? Millions! They'll throw shit at the wall and be like, no, my Candy Crush! Then they'll
earlier
get
the game
it.
Concord was mentioned. That's actually an excellent example, because it's publicly stated that at least 370 million euros were spent developing that game, and it did not include an end-of-life plan like what we're seeking. Most of the cost for developing games tends to come from other areas like art assets or marketing. This is just one element out of hundreds that already go into making.
And I still advocate for bad games to be preserved. I do. I remember the Angry Video Game Nerd made a review on really, really bad games, and I watched it probably like 15, maybe 12 years ago. And it's like, they deserve the right to exist because you need something to go off of. Like, I thought the video was hilarious. It was that horrible E.T. game and Sonic OX, like top 5 worst games or something. And it's like, you need to keep them alive so people know what's bad.
Game.
Yeah, it's history, exactly.
The other thing is sometimes industry costs or estimates of how much this would cost can be faulty, because they're expecting the game they're asking for to have every last feature it did while it was being supported. And many of those can be retired and don't even make sense for a game that's no longer being supported, like administration or anti-cheat measures or account management or things like that. So that can drastically, there can be hundreds, or known as microservices, associated with these that can be disabled, and the customer still has the core game. So that should be taken into account when figuring out the potential cost. And it might have been mentioned earlier, but we also want to emphasize the companies have been paid already once for the working game, so that should be factored into the budgeting. There were some other points mentioned on the right to repair, whether we need it and how long a product should work. With right to repair, that's a little bit different issue. Well, that's certainly welcome, having the right to that. As I mentioned in my presentation, there are deliberate countermeasures to prevent repair. That it's almost like a small miracle when it does happen from extremely experienced software professionals for resurrecting a game.
Yeah, patching a game is extremely difficult. I even think the biggest example I can say is like, WoW Classic, when it came out, they ran into a bunch of issues where old exploits came to the surface because they got patched out as the game is 20 years old. I think there's issues with compatibility with OSs. Like, some games like Fallout, for example, sometimes you have to launch that bitch in Windows XP or Windows 7 because it just literally does not work.
However, if there were
engineer.
repair instructions, that would be very welcome. I think we would even consider that a viable alternative to what we're asking if it was practical to resurrect the game that way. And for how long it should work, it's kind of again, the customer standard is indefinitely, as long as they keep the game in good working order on their end. And we're not trying to hold any publishers responsible for updates that break things that wasn't their doing. So
if I am a person who purchases a vinyl, I have a vinyl set that can play the song or, you know, the album because I have the equipment. But what's fucked here is that they can just take away the equipment to run it and I can't play it legally. I have to go pirate it to play it, which sucks.
So how long they choose to support it, we're completely open to. I mean,
you have to keep it alive forever.
It's only fair,
but they won't do it.
I mean, they, as far as we're concerned, they could end support the next day, but as long as the game isn't destroyed, we would find that acceptable. And the last point on the, for doing this through the existing, just doing this through the courts, through the legal action, that still doesn't get to the heart of the matter of the game itself being destroyed. We're not really refunds and compensation. Those are a secondary measure that when the game itself can't be reinstated, we just want the game preserved. So doing it through the existing framework doesn't quite get us there necessarily.
Crazy. Props to him. It takes a lot of guts to go up there in front of millions of people, by the way. I couldn't imagine. I already had trouble presenting in front of like 20 people at school. That was great. Good job, man. Thank you for standing up for video games. Big ups for Ross Scott fighting the good fight. Can't believe Price Brooklyn busted his kneecap. Honestly, I think it backfired on him. Yeah, go check him out. Good job on him.
Oh, yeah.